back to episode 2 with Tina Wallace from Thames Valley Police. We spoke in the first episode about her start in policing and until today where we meet Tina. She is a person that made a decision about bringing herself to larger knowledge, I would say. I need to know more about this, Tina, because I know that you now got a master in applied criminology and police management by joining the Cambridge University. So how about your master thesis and what's the idea behind it and why did you start to study?
It happened by accident. I never thought for a second that I would ever get to go to university, never mind Cambridge University. I didn't even know it was a thing. And it was only through my, she was a superintendent at the time. She's an assistant chief constable in Thames Valley Police, Katie Barrow-Grint. She was my boss. And she was aware of this project I was running, which is called Project Vigilant. And that's really what my master's is about. And she encouraged me to apply for it. And I kept saying to her, I can't do this. I didn't even have a formal education. I didn't go to secondary school. And that's a whole other interview as to why I've done that, which was all my own fault. So it was my poor life choices. So I didn't think I'd ever get accepted into an institution, especially Cambridge. But Thames Valley Police have this pathway. And I was so grateful that they supported me through it. So it came about by accident because I wasn't expecting to go. And Katie had said, well, why don't you apply for it and see how you get on? So it was that really that did it. And it was the best experience I've had. I mean, 2 years, it was tricky. And I felt like an imposter a lot of the time, thinking I don't belong here because I don't really have any qualifications other than cooking. So if you've watched the first interview, you'll know I was pretty bad at that as well. But I went there and I enjoyed it. I spent most days Googling specific academic terms. So, because I didn't want to put my hand up and say, what does external validity mean? So I Googled it. So I Googled an awful lot of all of these academic terms. And I just tried to figure it out and see how I got on with it. But wonderful experience.
Yeah. Well, as I've been there myself, I can hear what you tell, because coming as I did as a Swedish-speaking person and had to understand everything in English, and I was the only one that did my master thesis at the time and my master education with the second language of mine as English, and to understand all these new academic terms wasn't easy. And some of my English colleagues couldn't even help me. So Google was a really good instrument at the time. And I'm happy to hear that you also had a kind of an engagement with Google. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Premier service from Google, I think I got.
Yes. Yeah. And it's education that is 25%. So it's divided into 2 years of studies, and you do quite a lot of work along that route. So tell us a little bit about this. All the essays you had to write before and the challenges around that.
Yeah, so it was. I laughed because my first essay, I got the feedback back. So I wasn't used to academic feedback as well. I mean, I work in an operational policing area where it can be quite brutal. You know, if you make a mistake, you put your hand up and everyone tells you you've made a mistake. But academia is absolutely, it's brutal. So the feedback I got, I was expecting after my first essay to have my essay sent back to me with red pen, because that's what I thought it was like, advising me of what I've done and where I've gone wrong. And that didn't happen. So in summary, so I'm going to summarise what the feedback was. And it was pretty much, don't ever darken our doorstep with this nonsense ever again. That was my first. That was my taking from it. So my first year supervisor, Crispian Strachan, who was an absolutely incredible individual and real genius and helped. He was just wonderful with me.
Yes.
He sort of picked me back up and brushed me back down, and he said it wasn't that bad. Well, it was. I mean, I just about scraped through with my first score, but I used that first essay and the feedback to submit as my apprenticeship portfolio for the following year, because I wanted to show how bad it was from my very first one to actually I got 71 on my dissertation. So I'll take that. So it just showed the growth. Yeah. But the essays were quite interesting because it followed like a particular format, and it took me maybe 2 or 3 to realise the essay topic would be about what you've just learned off that previous 2 weeks. And I was just was just constantly learning as I was going and trying to put my own spin on it as well, because I'm not a conventional thinker. I never have been. So you couldn't really put me in a conventional policing role, because I think so far out of the box, it's unbelievable. Where most people think, are you a police officer? Because I think so very differently to everybody else. But I still wanted to apply my own thought processes to the essay, and just to see what would work, and to test, would my hypothesis of going after this, like, I think it was one of the essays, it was, the first one was on places, then victims on the offenders. So on the offender essay, I wanted to try a prediction of risk tool, and it was based on a presentation Jeff Barnes gave, and I thought, well, actually, I really like AI. I like how computers, how you can weight certain behaviours specifically for the work I was doing, and could we build a prediction of risk tool that would probably give us an indicator when someone comes into custody of, like, this individual, if you let him out of custody, is going to go and offend. And I know it was only an essay, so I had the opportunity to be bold and ambitious. So and I liked that with the essays. I loved the way that it was prescriptive but not too prescriptive, so you could still sort of like just test your own theory and knowledge and apply a bit of innovation to it. So it was good. It was challenging, because you still have to do that on top of your day role, and still learn about all those different academic terms. And then in the background, you're still thinking, I've got my thesis to do, which I couldn't wait. So I wanted to get year one out of the way, because I didn't really understand it. If I'm honest, I spent all my time Googling, thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. But then year two, I just wanted to start on my thesis, because I always knew what I was going to do with that.
Yeah. And you knew what you wanted to do, and also the journey to reach that stage that you really would like to write this is also something that is really interesting, because the progress of knowledge you easier see when you look at it afterwards, more or less, because as you said, you didn't understand why you went to Cambridge the first year, and it took a while to drop it into your brain. But what happened, I know what happened, because you wrote your thesis and you went to be invited to present it at the Society of Evidence-Based Policing conference in September at Cambridge University. And this is not something that is asked from everyone that writes a thesis during this master education. So you one of the lucky ones, and you one of the talent ones, because you want to be invited to do that. Can you tell us a little bit about this master thesis? Is it about tracking, testing, and targeting sexual offenders? But what more is it in it, and what was the result of it?
So it was based on it's a descriptive study about something we're doing in Thames Valley Police. It's broader now, so eight forces do this now, and it's called Project Vigilant, and it's based on the connection between what are seemingly low-level behaviours of street harassment, and what the connection is between that and serious sexual violence. And because I work in this proactive crime prevention strategy, the idea is to positive enforcement of the lesser offending will prevent more serious offending. So stop an offender before he escalates into sexual violence. And it came about, again, by accident, which is all the good things happen by accident. So in Oxford, which is, it's world famous. So, it's the home of the Dreaming Spires. That's how it's known for. But there was, in 2019, there was a spike in serious sexual offending, a surge in stranger rapes, and it went from the home of the Dreaming Spires to being reported in the news as the place where you're most likely to get raped if you're a female in Thames Valley Police. And that was just outrageous. And so conventional policing didn't work. So what we normally do, if there's a spike in violence, we normally put more officers to it, and then we'll put dogs and the horses out and the helicopters up. That wasn't working, so we needed a different approach. But what had also happened, so more worryingly, was there was a male, he was called the Prowler. He had been targeting females as they were walking home from a night out, and then he was stalking them till they got home, waiting until they settled, and then he broke into their houses. And he escalated from stealing laundry from them to sexual violence. And that was obviously a significant problem as well. So I was approached as the surveillance and the covert operations manager from Thames Valley Police. I was approached in order to deal with that. And it was easy for us, because we just looked at the problem analysis triangle, and we looked at the victimology, and each of the victims had walked home along a set route. That's clearly where he was targeting them. So we targeted the same area. And it was during that period of time where we were targeting the same area, we identified him via his behaviours. So we noticed him stalking particular women, and then he'd potentially approach a woman. And if, based on her threshold for that harassment, so some of the women would fob him off or you'd tell him to go away and he would, but then he'd try it with somebody else. And he was almost being empowered based on the personality of the victim. But more worryingly, we saw 41 other men demonstrating exactly the same behaviours as him. So we stopped everyone, and everyone we stopped, we did like a risk assessment process. So we took their details, but they fell into 4 distinct categories. So we had men who were convicted sex offenders. We had men who had been arrested previously for sexual offence or rape, but not been convicted. That's really challenging. We had men who had been arrested for other crime types. That comes relevant now. And then we had men who had never come to our attention ever before, but they were all demonstrating the same behaviours. And I thought that was interesting because I was thinking there's got to be something there. And that's how Project Vigilant was built. And the research was then built around that because we caught the prowler, and then we'd had a reduction in sexual violence and just general violence and a reduction in stranger rapes because of our response to the prowler. It was decided that we would broaden that strategy to the whole of Thames Valley Police. So 2 years later, we'd had this rich data set, and my ACC at the time, Katie Barragrin, I'd said to her, I want to do some research on this because there was nothing that I could find anywhere in academia that had been done in this particular crime type before, because these behaviours that we were seeing from these men were seemingly low level street harassment. But what we had seen is, because of the men we'd stopped, there's clear connection between that and sexual violence. So that's what I wanted to write about. And I think whether or not I've done that correlation, I don't think so yet, because it was a descriptive study. But I believe the findings from my research, depending on who the reader is, will start to join the dots and then go, actually, that relates to that. So that's kind of what the thesis was about. But it's answered the questions I asked of it, but it's generated more questions. So we're now doing more research on top of what I've done as well. And we're also, these things like, I suggested in my findings that we should adapt the law for going equipped to commit a sexual offence. And when I said earlier on about some men were known for other areas of criminality, so what we do is we tend to label people for what they were arrested or convicted for. So for instance, somebody, if we was to stop them and they're known for knife crime, we look a little bit deeper on that, because it could be we've stopped him and we've had grounds to search, and we found potentially condoms, lubricant, zip ties. We seem to find a lot of zip ties on individuals, mask, balaclava, and a knife. He'll be convicted for the knife offence, but actually all the other items would be indicative of being about to commit a sexual offence. So one of the things I said in my findings is we should change our laws and create new laws, especially for this preventative area of business, and have going equipped to commit a sexual offence. And we're now talking to the government about that, and they're open to having this, and also having a bespoke power of search for police officers, because we're relying on different areas. We're trying to take powers from different areas of business that are just not relevant, because this crime type is evolving considerably at a rate of knots, but our laws are not keeping up with it.
No. And I think that is one of the things that is the speed of the law decisions can, and I'm so happy that they listen to you and listen to your findings. And I would say, Tina, that when I sat there in the audience at Cambridge University listening to you as a previous sexual offender investigator, I just said to myself, so much I recognize, but I never thought what you thought, that I should have done some kind of more deep research into it, because I chose another area when I went to Cambridge. But you really put your finger onto it, and to have started, as you said, do I belong in Cambridge? Yes, you do. You really belonged in Cambridge, because that was the way you could come forward with all your thoughts about how to, protect people and prevent these awful crimes. Because what you're describing about these men are equipping themselves, and we only see one of the items among many, many others. I think that is something that we need to have a good thought around. I would say that that you've now been listening to episode number 2 with Tina. And if you would like to listen more about her master thesis and also the work that is now taking place in Thames Valley, I would ask you to invite her for a little bit more time than this interview, because she is worth to listen to, and she got a wide knowledge within the area she just been touching on to. So thank you for listening to episode number 2. We will continue in number 3, and please come back when it's time for that publication. Thank you for listening today.